Hi and welcome to the studio here again in North Wales. Haven't been on for a while, and I think I need to address that. So, first things first, what I'm going to be doing today is a little video about the use of greens in landscape using watercolour and wet in wet techniques. There's an awful lot of greens in landscape, and rather than buying dozens of tubes of paint, it's quite handy to know how to mix them and what to put where. So, without further ado, I shall get on with it. Okay, thanks. See you in a bit. So here we are. I've got a photograph here that I'm going to be working from. It's a little view of the River Clywedog just down the road in Erddig Park. It's taken in the height of summer last year, and basically, apart from bits of blue here and some white over in the far corner, it's almost all various shades of green, some browns down here. But what I'm going to do is try to simplify that and make sure that we actually get something that looks like grass and trees and things like that. So without further ado, I shall get started. I've just put a very loose line to show roughly where it's going to change from river to trees. I may possibly change that as I go along. It's a bit halfway. Right, okay, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use a little bit of candle, and I'm going to get some sparkle into the water. There's some bits of rapids going across there, and all I'm doing is just dragging some of the candle wax across there, which means that in those bits the paint won't stick to the paper. So clean water, and I'm not going to wet the whole paper, I'm going to wet bits of the paper, because I'm going to put bits of colour here, there and everywhere. So I haven't made all of the paper wet, and I'm going to use my small squirrel mop. To start with, I'm going to be doing this very light bit over there, so I'm going to use, mainly to start with, I'm going to lay in some lemon yellow, which I shall mix with a tiny amount of yellow ochre, just to take some of the acid out of it. I've got it wet but fairly strong. The board's at an angle of about 20 degrees, maybe a bit more. Now, a little bit more of the lemon, and into that I'm going to put just a tiny touch of ultramarine. I'm letting these mix together on the paper. Keeping it very wet, letting some of it run down. And I don't want a single colour wash. I want it to be a splodgy wash. Now, I'm putting some more yellowy bits over here, and into that there will be lots of darks, but that is behind the main trees. Now that should still be quite damp, so now I'm going to use a little bit of hooker's green and some ultramarine and a touch of raw umber. Which will give us a nice dark colour, which I want to drop into these bits. Where the shadow is. I'm not actually painting anything here, you may notice. I'm just letting these colours blend on the paper. Just putting some darks along there. I don't want it too dark, so I'm going to actually put some even darker bits into that. I'm also going to take out some bits from there and use my little 1/2 inch flat, and there's a bit which I want to take out where there's a shaft of sunlight which hits the bank over here. I'll leave that. Now, that's still damp, so mix more of my ultramarine hooker's green. Yeah, really dark colour, quite thick. And I want some really dark bits. Just using the very tip of this pointy brush. Keeping this really quite thick because the thicker paint always runs into the waterier paint. See, I'm no good at splattering. That was very brave of me. I really do get very nervous about trying to splatter, but a lot of my students always tell me I must, so I had a go. Still, what I'm doing now is I've got fairly thick paint. I'm not going to worry about the splatters there. I'm putting the really deep shadowy bits in. using the brush a lot drier over here. This is where my darkest shadowy bits are. Back to my 1/2 inch square. I'm going to mix Payne's grey into that greeny colour, some ultramarine, so that's Payne's grey, ultramarine into that green. Now big black tree, okay. Now I need to put some more bright yellow green. I'm going to try something that I've never ever used before. This is paint called, I think it's called bright green or leaf green or something. It was given to me as a free sample by the SAA, so I'm going to see how it works. I'm not going to, it looks very mechanical, so I'm not going to use it on its own, but I'll mix some on there and put some of this lemon yellow into it to see how it works for this slightly more greeny yellowy background here behind these trees. It looks quite nice actually. Usually the only mixed green I ever use is Hookers with watercolour, because I find it's quite versatile. I'll put some of it over here as well. Where I've left white paint, I can go over the top and get other things there. Okay, while that's drying, and tidy up that edge there. And I'm going to mix some of this Charles Evans sand with some yellow ochre. So that's Charles Evans sand, yellow ochre, and I just want a sort of beachy bit going along here. It's pulling some of that in, but it doesn't really matter. Tidy it up where it's come in. In fact, I'll suck out a little bit along the edge. So there, we've got that. Now, I'm going to get a large squirrel, which is almost square, and I'm going to put some dark shadowy bits there. Now, I've got raw umber, that's not working at all, get rid of it, I'll use this one. Don't know what's the matter with that, I must have used it for something else, but here we go. I've got my Squirrel blend, Stratford and York. Burnt sienna. Oh, I've got some grease on there, that's what it is. Burnt sienna, raw umber. Touch of that green. And now I should have a nice reflecty sort of colour along there. See where it's not actually picking up where the candle wax is. Now use the green that I mixed over there, and I've added some of that colour to it. Bit more green, bit of the yellow. Now I'm going to drag some dark shadows for underneath these trees. Now I'm going to mix some pure ultramarine blue, quite a lot of water with it. This is going to be a shiny bit of river. squeezed out the brush. Drag some little white bits. Now, all of that at the moment is wet in wet, so I'm gonna just let it sit for a few minutes and let it dry, and then I'll go back in and do some wet on dry. Right, there we go, that's all lovely and dry now, and I'll get on and start doing the next bits. Okay, first thing I want to do is this dark bit over there, which I will use my little squirrel mop again. I love this brush, it's very adaptable, you can do all sorts of things with it. So here we go. Hooker's green into that dark colour. I'm just reactivating the paints as I go along. They've been happily drying out. Hooker's green, ultramarine, raw umber. Really dark colour, pretty much the same as it was before. And now I'm going to blob in some, actually, shadowy bits there. Just putting in dabs which aren't actually single leaves, they're just dots and splashes and stuff, pretty much like I did over there, but this is even darker. Now, as I get down here, there's more dark than there is light. What I'm doing now is wet over dry, and I'm not pushing hard or deep, I'm just letting this paint sit on top of the other paint, which is dry underneath it. Now, because I've got this reflecty bit here, I'm going to put nice dark reflection of that under there. That goes out to about there, so put some bits of it going out as far as I want them to. Okay, right, now dig out my little rigger. There he is. SAA synthetic. Well, it's called, not pretend, imitation sable. Now, get a really dark colour, which is mainly Payne's grey into this dark green, and then I'm going to put some big branches growing up through there. And where I put these big ones in, I'll do some branches coming off. Okay, I've got most of that. Again, Payne's grey, ultramarine, touch of alizarin crimson to warm it up, and some hints of a really dark at the bottom of this. Always find some places where you put your darkest darks by your lightest lights, because that makes it look very, very interesting. Called counter change. Right, now the trees are pretty much done now, so I'm going to go back in down here with, actually I'll use the raw sienna. Now that's the raw sienna. Nice and watery down here. Picking up some of that other colour into it on purpose. If you remember, this is where I pulled some of the paint out to make room for this light sunshiny bit, which I'm putting in here. Because I'm using this raw sienna quite wet, it's pulling up the stuff underneath, and I'm doing that on purpose which is not best practice, because this is the way that you make mud. But I know I've only got one colour under there, and I'm pulling it up into a lighter colour which is fairly opaque, so that should just bleed into it, I hope. Put a little bit more going out there. Okay, we've got that. I'll go back into that, put lots more difficult bits in there. Back to my big wash brush, and again I'm going to use, clean the brush, I'm going to clean a space on my palette. Now, got those bluey bits. Trying to get that colour or a similar colour to that now, which I started out with lemon yellow, smidge of this bright green, and I'm going to put a tiny touch of ultramarine and a tiny touch of light red, just to take the gunginess off it. Now I need that darker. I need quite a strong wash, which is tricky with a lot of lemon yellow in it because it's very, very, very transparent washes, so I need a lot of paint. And when I say a lot of paint, I mean I'm using a lot of paint. Now, that's still quite runny, but it's quite strong, and I'm just pulling it over these white bits here. Now, so there I've got this sort of reflecty bit there. Again, there's bits where I've dragged across the rough paper, and there's also bits of candle wax in there as well to keep it sparkling. Now back to my little thingy brush, and burnt umber, no, raw umber, burnt sienna. Touch of ultramarine to darken it down. I want a really vibrant dark. Because just putting in some little bits of reflection darks amongst these. Now, very, very dark, some Payne's grey into that dark brown that I've used there, just to put a hard edge along this little bit of now here I've got all that yellow ochre stuff, which I'm not sure if you can see, but there's lots of, I'll try zooming in a bit. You see the feathery bits in there. It's quite nice that. Okay, now blub blub blub. I'm going to get a small sable. Because I want to put some little lines here. Okay, now all I'm really doing is putting in darks and lights in this. What's it better? I'm using this. This is a number 2 rigger. The one I used over here was a number 3, and I'm just holding it quite far up and letting the point dance to make broken marks. I'm trying to keep an eye on where these runs have gone into there, where it's picked up stuff. Again, it's all texture. I'm not drawing twigs or leaves. I'm just letting this rigger dance. Use the side of it. Use all the different bits of the brush. Just picking up random darks. When I say random, I mean I'm dipping into the ultramarine, the umber and the hooker's green. But I'm not mixing specific colours. Now when I've got this, I'm going to make a nice thick dark ultramarine, raw umber, touch of alizarin crimson, and now some twiggy bits. Same over here. I'm using just the heel of the brush, very dry, just to drag it across here to give some texture. Now where's my little square brush? There he is. Dry him off. So I want a brown see-through watery bit. I'm using the raw umber. Almost on its own. Now see-through, and I want to put some more shadows over these green bits. It's a very shallow and peaty river, the Clywedog. So the water itself, especially when it's been running quite quickly, is brown. And I want it thin so that you can see the green reflection-y colour through the brown water, hopefully. pull some little bits out of there. All I'm doing, clear water, dry the brush and pull it out. The most difficult thing about that technique is remembering where you put the water. Right, so now some even darker bits, ultramarine into that raw umber, and I'm going to put some ripply bits. Now, here I've got a shadowy stony bit, so I'm going to use this brush again, ultramarine and Payne's grey, touch of alizarin. Now I'm going to put this really dark bit on top here. Now, get my credit card. Corner of it, and oh, sorry, that one's too sharp. No. There, that's better. Having to rush because you only get a very narrow window. Again, on this corner, mainly very thick raw umber. there. Now I'm not happy about that bit. No, it's okay, I know what I can do there. Clean up a little bit of space on my palette. In fact, I'm cleaned out the whole thing, because what I'm going to do now, see, that's me cleaning it all up. What I'm going to do now is add some body colour, just in various places where it's gone a bit dark. Now there's several ways I can do this, and I'll do most of them. But first things first, I'm using this little rigger and I'm picking up the Charles Evans sand. If you don't want to get Charles Evans sand, it's a bit tricky. The only you get it from Charles Evans, and I think Dale Rowney do it, but the SAA do a colour called sandstone, which has most of the same properties. In that, it's very thick. It's not quite gouache, but it's nice thick paint. Into that, put some yellow ochre. Which is also a rather opaque colour. And what I'm going to do is put in some tree trunks going through the dark bits. Just to break this up a little bit. Also put some little freckles of light . Just dragging some light colours over to break up the water. I've actually left far too much there. So, I don't know if you can see it, but down there, that dirty manky thing is actually a little puddle of gouache, white gouache, which I will reactivate now. Back to my little thing again, and this, there's the white gouache. getting a lot of that paint quite thick on this little rigger, and I just want to break up these shadows. Just a few little sparkly bits on the water. Keeping these going horizontal. Now this is one of those techniques where you've got to really be on guard against yourself for doing it too much. Right, I'm nearly there now. A few bits of twiggy grasses coming up there. If I do any more to that, I'm going to knacker it. So there we go. I don't know what to call it, but there we go. We've got another little painting. Hopefully it shows several techniques for wet over dry, wet over dry and wet in wet, and also the use of body colour just to pull stuff out. But I'm hopeful that it's got some sense of light and shade in there. I think I might just mix some gouache in with that and put some dots of light coming through there where they are in the actual picture. Yeah, do. Okay, right, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.